down in the basement of the shop now. This is where I can spread out this big lumber and do some rough milling on it. You can see what we've got here are the pieces that are going to be the top and the bottom of the mantle, and we're going to sandwich the laminated veneered pieces that we made between the top and the bottom. Now, these top and bottom pieces are supposed to end up being 3 inches thick. These entire 4 planks came from one big plank. We had to mill them into thinner planks in order to dry them. Well, they're dry now, and so the next step is to take each of these pairs of planks, which you can see are matched, and make a true face on each one of them. Thickness them to a little over 1.5 inches thick, glue them together, and then finally mill them down to 3-inch thick planks. And the idea is to be 3-inch thick, about 12 inches wide, so we have a little bit of excess here to come off, and 108 inches long. And 108 inches brings us right up to about the point here where the planks start to taper down. So we'll end up, cutting off about here to get our 108-inch length. We'll use the excess that we cut off later on in the mantle, and we should end up with pretty nice pieces. Now, you can see maybe that there's some defects in here, cracks and so forth. We're going to have to look very carefully at. Maybe use some butterflies or something to hold together, but that's all part of the charm of the piece. I've got the planks cut roughly to length. Now I'm flattening one side, and I'm using my big 16-inch grizzly jointer. This thing's a nice, big, powerful machine that can take these wide planks, which right now are a little over 12 inches wide, and actually flatten the bottom using this rotating cutter head with a blade. Now these planks are so large that I'm having to use a little assistance from an in-feed and out-feed stand. You can't see the out-feed stand. It was just like this one. It's on the other end of the jointer, and it helps me support this big heavy lumber. This system is also hooked up to my dust collection, so I don't get a lot of dust in the shop. One surface of each plank is now true using the jointer, and that would be this bottom surface here, nice and flat. Now we're going to get the top surface parallel to the bottom surface and thickness this piece down close to the 1.5 inches that we want. To do that, I'm going to use a 20-inch planer. This machine drives the wood through on a flat table, and there's a cutter head on top that will take snipes off of the board and thickness it. I'll run that through several times. Got the planks relatively thickness the way I like them to be, but I want to make the glue surface where I glue two planks together as good as I can. And so I'm going to make a couple of final passes with my very best thickness planer. This Makita 2040 makes a very smooth surface, and later on all I'll have to do is a little sanding to work out any small defects, and then we'll be ready to glue up. I'm doing before gluing the two planks together is using a little 800 grit sandpaper to remove any planer knife marks from the surface, get it perfectly smooth, a little bit rough so it can accept the glue better, and make a nice tight joint. You see two of the planks glued together. I used Unibond 800 and I mixed the medium color catalyst with the light color catalyst to try to replicate what I think the final color of the mantle is going to be, so the glue line won't be visible. And you can see I used a lot of clamps. The idea here is to get tons and tons of clamping pressure, and I pretty much used as many clamps as I could fit. Okay, this is a glued up set. Got the two planks that are a little over 1.5 inches thick each. Glued together makes a little more than 3 inches that we will then thickness in a bit. But first, I need to make these sides parallel and make the total width 12 inches. Now before I did the glue up, I had snapped chalk lines so that I could help align the two planks properly to get my 12 inches of thickness. But chalk lines, you know, are a little bit light, I guess is the best word to see when you're using the bandsaw. So I'm going to go ahead and pencil in, using a straight edge, pencil in these chalk lines so that I can really see them when I'm sawing these to width. Now I'm going to use the bandsaw to get the right width to cut off the waste. These planks are heavy. Right now this plank is probably about 90 pounds. The finished version that I weighed was 83 pounds. So I've got to use these accessory stands to support the plank as I guide it through the bandsaw. All my attention needs to be directed towards the actual bandsawing operation, not trying to hold up a 90-pound plank inside a bandsaw blade. Now, this studio furniture piece, this mantle, it's not just a lot of brute labor. It's actually an art form. And we're at the art part now. What I've got to determine is how to orient these planks in order to make the mantle look right. Now, before we get started, it helps to know where the mantle actually is going to exist on the wall. And I'm going to home in on the wall of my shop. Now you can see the floor. If you go up about 5 feet 7 inches or so, you see the bottom of the bottom plank of the mantle. And the top of the top plank is above door height. So that's, 82 inches or so high. So in deciding how to orient these planks, what face is going to be up and what face is going to be down, the first thing is important to know is if you are the observer and you're walking up to this mantle, the part you're going to actually see is the bottom. So that's going to be the most visible part of this mantle for the person that is, in the room, perhaps sitting down, even standing up, because that's above eye level for the average person. Now, the other thing to consider is that in this particular room, there's a big cathedral ceiling and a walkway around the second floor that looks down into the room. So you'd actually be standing up on the walkway looking down at the top of the mantle. So for those people, the top of the mantle is the most visible, but it's not likely that someone's going to actually be touching it with their fingers. So I'm looking at these planks, and the first thing I determined is that the inside of each plank, or what the inside of each plank was going to be, and I actually oriented them so that they come from the log in the order in which they've been cut. So if you look at the inside of one plank, it matches up with the inside of the other plank. The next thing I had to do was determine exactly where these curved laminates were going to fit. So I went ahead and measured out, drew them, and I've just got them sitting in there very precariously right now on some blocks of wood, but just to give me an idea of how this will look. So if you walk into the room, the first thing you're going to see is a very shallow angle look at the bottom of the mantle. You'll see the inside of the planks. You'll see the top of the inside, and so these planks have some defect, so I had to determine exactly where that defect is going to be. And when you're setting down something on the mantle, you're likely to set it down on the inside of the bottom plank. So for that, I'm using the most clear piece of the most clear face, knowing that that's the face that people are going to touch, and I've got to make sure that it's smooth, that they don't get a splinter, and that when you set down a knick-knack or something on there, it's going to have a good solid surface. However, the very top of the mantle is only going to be visible from people on the second floor, so I picked the most dramatic face for that, and that's the face actually that has the most defect. There's some very dramatic voids in here. You can see maybe a little bit of curl, a little waviness in the grain. There's a small amount of bird's eye, but mostly a little bit down here, a little bit of spalting maybe. Actually, I'm seeing some ambrosia beetle marks. So that's the most dramatic face. So that's the one you'll see from the actual second floor, and you'll see also the inside face of the bottom piece, which has more curl, more figure to it. So there's a little bit of curl, a little bit of bird's eye in this particular plank. So I think that'll give you the most dramatic view. So that's how we're going to set this up. And boy, this is a massive mantle. It's going to be a big piece. It's going to sit very proudly on the wall. It's going to look great. I'm at the point now where all the rough work with these planks is all done, and before I can do the final fitting of the planks, the actual fireplace has to be completed by the general contractor, so that will be at least a few weeks. So I'll be storing these planks clamped together with stickers in between to allow some airflow, just to keep them in their shape. If they tend to want to warp a little bit, by clamping them, I'll have a tendency to keep them in their original shape. And in the meantime, one of the things I can do is a little sanding on here, get these down to a very smooth surface, so that later on I can start doing some joinery and so forth, and be just one step further along. One of the questions that came to mind was, why did I use Unibond 800 to glue these two planks together? And the reason is that Unibond 800 does not creep. Okay, if these planks were glued with, say, a typical woodworking glue, an aliphatic resin glue, then those glues are somewhat plastic. And if these top and bottom pieces that make up this 3-inch plank expand and contract at a little bit different rate due to the moisture absorption from the air, you feel a little ridge at the joint. And I don't want that to happen, so I used a Unibond 800, which is a very stiff glue, and these planks will not creep relative to one another. The other thing I didn't show you was, after I bandsawed these edges flat, I took them downstairs to the 16-inch jointer and jointed the edges nice and smooth, so that now I have a nice 12-inch thick plank with smooth edges. So now I'm going to get on to the sanding. Put on some gloves because I'll be doing sanding for a long time, and the vibration, I don't want to hurt my arms. So let's get started. Okay, I'm all done making the planks. I've got them stickered and clamped. I've trued the sawhorses so it's a nice level surface. And I noticed when I put the two planks together, there's a little bit of a gap in the middle, meaning that they had bowed a little bit. So I've made the center sticker a little bit thin to give us a little bit of a counter bow. And we'll just let this sit for several weeks until I'm ready to do the rest of the work on them, and just let the wood settle down. So we'll see you next time.